This story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time. It was a cold December night. I'm from Iowa, and the winters here get cold. Like, if you get stuck outside, you will freeze kind of cold. That plus the snowfall made everything dead silent. You could hear anything and everything inside the house, and even the immediate outside of it. My best friend Colton and I were hanging out in the family's basement, just having a boring winter's night playing video games. We were the only ones home, since my mom went straight to the bar after work to grab a few drinks with coworkers, so Colton and I thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately started panicking and looked for places to hide the bottle. Colton whispered, "I thought your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard heavy stomps and my mother yell out my name. I yelled back up the stairs, "Yup, just hanging out in the basement." I heard a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs until she yelled out again, "Can you come up and help me with something? I need you up here." I replied back, frantically trying to find a good place to hide the bottle of wine, that I would be up in a minute. Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" she yelled in a more serious tone that sounded slightly off from my mother's. This was the first red flag. She never cared if anyone was over, as our house was very open to all family members and friends. The voice, it just sounded wrong. It sounded like my mother's, but was missing something that I couldn't place my finger on. Weirded out, I replied back that it was Colton. I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the stairs. Walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house, and a slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top steps, I looked over to where the garage doors and kitchen met. It was black, pitch black. All the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining in from any of the windows. I walked over to the kitchen, yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I felt the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicked in. I had to get out of there as soon as possible. My mother was not home. I ran back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. Colton looked at me funny and asked what was wrong. I replied quickly, saying that my mom was not home and that we needed to leave. I could see the confusion in his face. He started to speak, but I hushed him as I took a few steps back upstairs and saw my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. For some reason, I couldn't leave them. "Are we leaving?" Colton asked, still very confused. I shook my head and pulled out my phone to call my mom. She picked up immediately, and I asked if she was just at home. She sounded confused, stating that she was just leaving the bar now. Her tone then changed to concern as she asked if I was okay. I filled her in on the whole story as she rushed home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. The whole time I could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, moving from one room to the next, almost as if it was searching. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just fallen away. We still have never figured out what was going on. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved to Arizona, but whenever I go back to Iowa and see Colton, we still get creeped out by what happened. I live in an upscale apartment complex in a relatively nice area. It has standalone buildings with 4 apartments in each, 2 on the ground floor and 2 in the upper floor. The only thing I don't like is that many of the buildings have basements that connect the buildings to each other. All 3 of the other tenants in my building are single girls, and I'm a single man. We usually keep to ourselves. None of us are really friends or talk to each other. I think the three girls all have boyfriends because they're usually gone on the weekends. On Fridays, I usually have a few drinks and play some video games, or have a few buddies over. On this particular night, I was alone. I played on my Xbox and had a few strong beers. I was feeling pretty good and was just sitting on the couch in that sort of, do I go to bed or do I have another mindset? I started playing on my phone for a minute until I heard a loud pounding on my door. I froze and sat there, listening. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I've never had any of my neighbors knock on my door. I yelled out, "Who is it?" No answer. Around 20 seconds of silence, then more loud pounding. Getting pissed off in my drunken state, I yelled, "Who is it?" mixing in a few curses this time. No answer again. I got up and looked through my peephole and saw no one. I couldn't see left or right, and I wasn't drunk enough to open the door and look, so I put the chain lock on and went back to my game. Nothing else happened the rest of the night, but I felt on edge as I sobered up and didn't fall asleep for quite a while, even though I knew I was safe. The next week flew by, and I just forgot about it, thinking it was just the girl and her boyfriend who lived beneath me. They were both potheads, and I'd heard them laughing and yelling in the parking lot multiple times before. The next Friday night, around midnight, I'm doing the same, drinking and playing video games. Suddenly, I heard the booming pounds on my door again. This time, I shout, "Okay, you're done," and go grab a knife from the kitchen, all the while more pounding on my door. This time, whoever is on my door tried the doorknob several times while pounding. I walked up towards the door, pounding my feet, trying to intimidate the culprit. I flung open the door to see no one, but I heard footsteps going down to the main floor. I decided to follow the footsteps, which led me to my building's basement. I took a deep breath and cautiously walked down the basement steps. My drunken bravery was starting to wear off. This was only my second or third time ever going into the basement, so I wasn't completely confident of the layout in the dark. Gripping the knife tightly and searching the wall for a light switch, I slowly walked down the steps. Looking around, I heard a small shuffle in the corner of the room. My head whipped towards the noise and saw a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of the room, barely illuminated from the light upstairs. I felt completely sober, frozen in place, heart in my stomach. My instincts finally kicked in and noped out of there. I'm not kidding, I actually said nope and turned around and booked it up the basement stairs, slamming the door shut and back to my apartment. Shaken, I thought about calling the police, but realized there wasn't much they could do. It's not a crime to stand creepily in the basement. I did, however, go to my porch and watch my neighbor's apartment to see if a light came on. No lights ever did, meaning it most likely was not one of them. Luckily, that was around a month ago, and it hasn't happened again. I was a toddler, no more than 3 years old, when my family and I lived in a small rented house in Vermont. There are a few faint things I remember about it. A spiral staircase, a large field, the cold cement floor, and a part of the house that I was strangely drawn to, the basement. I was, and still am, a wanderer, and didn't mind being alone. Both of those qualities made the basement a sort of getaway. I wasn't allowed down there by myself, but a handful of times I was able to sneak my way down there. I remember crawling down the stairs like they were a ladder, being overly cautious of falling as I had done before. Sometimes I would hear mumbling coming from somewhere in the basement, but it was too quiet for anything to be understandable. When I got over to the last step and turned around, I would always see her, over in the corner. A mannequin with blonde hair and an expressionless face. All I would think is that she looked like the mannequins in JCPenney or Kmart. I never once thought it was odd, since she was always there. Some basements have exercise equipment. We had a mannequin. Years later, and living in a different home, I decided to bring this up to my mom. Why would we have a store mannequin in our basement? My mother just gave me this puzzled look and said, We never once had a mannequin in any of the places we lived. I questioned her multiple times, but she was adamant we never owned a mannequin. To this day, I still have no idea what I saw.